What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video today, and in this video we are doing the 84th installment of Random Model Airports. Today we're going to be doing the Fairbanks International Airport. No suggestions were made for this airport, however if you have any new suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. Heading to the last great frontier for the very first time in this series. This is another region that I've really wanted to cover in some capacity, and finally I feel like I have enough models now to get a really good airport update in within this region. Still a couple aircraft that I'll be missing from this update, one of them being the Air North 737-500, so hopefully somebody makes that. That would be great to have for any Canadian collection, but quite frankly for any collection in that matter. But we do have this nice airport to check out, which is north of Anchorage by about an hour or two by car, and just down the road from Fairbanks is actually the town of North Pole, which I thought was pretty cool to see on Google Earth. But taking a look at some quick history, this airfield opened in 1951 to replace the Ladd Army Airfield for commercial flights. Previously, this used to be Alaska's primary hub, and they had a lot of operations out of here, but they since moved it to Anchorage starting in the 60s, and that's where their main hub has been ever since, at least in Alaska anyway. Now they have all their primary operations in Seattle now, which is a bit ironic given their branding, but hey, it happens. But even still, they've got the connection between Anchorage and Fairbanks locked down. Braniff and Pan Am, along with Japan Airlines and Korean Air, all were notable defunct carriers to have served Fairbanks over the years. And with Pan Am, JAL, and Korean Air, they did use this as a stopover for flights to and from Asia, mainly for like technical stuff and refueling and all that. And also Condor formerly served Fairbanks here in the early 2000s or so, and the outbound flight was a nonstop, and inbound to Fairbanks it was a one-stop service through Whitehorse, but they have since discontinued that service. And then overall, Fairbanks is served by Air North, which is a charter-only service, Alaska, Delta. They have Everett's Air, not the cargo or anything, but they do have plenty of that, plenty of Everett's Air stuff here. United has seasonal service to Chicago and Denver. Warbelow's Air Ventures and Wright Air Service also serve here as well. So those, I imagine, are the local Alaskan carriers that fly throughout the state, especially to the most isolated areas of the state, which getting past like Fairbanks even by car is extremely difficult if you've originated in Anchorage, or even if you're starting in Fairbanks, it is impossible to get anywhere by car in the most desolate areas of the state, since it's so rural. Some service changes for Fairbanks throughout the year. Delta will have some changes with their seasonal Minneapolis service ending September 7th. Salt Lake City will resume on June 8th, so that'll actually be this coming Sunday that service will resume on a seasonal basis, so great to see that, and good timing on my part to get Fairbanks done. We do have a Delta service in this update as well, and that will be well, you'll find out what it is when we get to that, but for now, we're going to pan down and get started at Gate 1 with a nice aircraft to kick us off here for this update. It is the Horizon Retro 175, as I slowly zoom into that to get that more dramatic effect. But starting off, this aircraft arrived in from Anchorage as Flight 2110 at 10:57 p.m., delayed from a 10:54 p.m. scheduled arrival, only delayed by 3 minutes. And ironically enough, another special livery is going to park at this gate in this update, which is actually the Washington State Cougars, I should say, Embraer 175. This also arrived in from Anchorage. This is Flight 2019, which is actually the earlier service in the afternoon, but arrived in 2 hours late at 3:46 p.m., so not sure what happened there, but it is what it is. Nothing you can do about it. But I saw that on the schedule. That was from Tuesday, June 3rd, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have to do it then, because there's two special liveries here at Fairbanks, so I've got to do this airport. Now we move on to the mainline, I guess you call it a mainline service now. This Alaska 738 all the way from Seattle as Flight 72. And this arrived in an hour late as well at 9:05 p.m., so another delay there from that 8:04 p.m. scheduled arrival as noted on your screen. Here's a substitution, one of several that we have in this update because either I don't have the models for them or they don't exist in the scale at all. but I'm using my American Eagle Piedmont Retro Dash 8 100 as a substitute for a Raven Alaska example that I have parked here at gate 3. Now, I don't know exactly where they park here at Fairbanks. I just placed it in one of the empty gates since I thought it would make sense, and then I have the little air stairs in the background from the jet bridge, if you noticed that already. This ride in from Anchorage is Flight 8101, right on time at 8:10 a.m. And that registration, November 884 Echo Alpha on this exact aircraft. I'll just do a quick Google search on the fly to get you some history for that specific aircraft. And coincidentally enough, this was also a former U.S. Airways Express operated by Piedmont Airlines airframe. So this aircraft is actually relatively accurate, at least for the real-life aircraft. So it started with Allegheny Commuter, then to U.S. Air Express, Allegheny Airlines, and then U.S. Airways Express operated by Allegheny, and then U.S. Airways Express operated by Piedmont, then to Era Alaska, and then Raven Alaska, and she's been with them since June of 2014 alongside Corvus Aviation. So that is who that is operated by. And then moving to gate 3, here's our Delta service. Bit surprised they used the A220-300 here to Fairbanks. Pretty unique aircraft for this service, but works out for variety's sake. This ride in from Seattle is Flight 2186 at 12:37 a.m., delayed from a 12:28 a.m. scheduled arrival, so a 9-minute delay here. And this would technically be still from the bank from the day before, so Monday, June 2nd in this case, but arriving in on the day of the 3rd, so it would leave the night of the 2nd and then get there in the early morning hours of the next day. You can see all the cargo aircraft in the background. We've got quite a few, and then one other aircraft. Some of those are substitutions, of course. But here we have one of the United seasonal services. They used both, they used MAX 8s on both of these services, so I only could put one of them in here. And in this case, I have the Denver service at gate 6. This arrived in at 7:46 p.m., delayed from a 7:41 p.m. scheduled arrival as Flight 1759. So there's the passenger terminal, looking really good. Like the layout of it. Pretty simple, but has some nice corners and, you know, round corners to it, I guess, however you want to describe it, but that's just how it is. And then we have Prime Air. It's been a little while since I've used a Prime Air aircraft in a random model airport update, but on the apron, this 737-800 arrived in from Portland, Oregon as Flight 3013. This is one of the Sun Country operated aircraft. This arrived in at 8:02 a.m., had a scheduled 8:21 a.m. arrival. And this aircraft in real life did have the split scimitars, but I don't think that's been made yet in the scale. And then we have a plethora of FedEx aircraft, but two of them are not FedEx aircraft in real life. They're actually the Everett Air aircraft. And on here, we have the Everett Air Alaska Cessna 208, which arrived in from Fort Yukon as Flight 5025 at 6:04 p.m., delayed from a 6 p.m. scheduled arrival. Got to get used to these aircraft because they're so cool. And then here's the Sky Courier, the Cessna 408. This arrived in from Galena, however you say that. That arrived in as Flight 5071 at 10:45 a.m., had a scheduled 10:47 a.m. arrival. And these are actually the passenger aircraft in this case, which is great. So nice to get some variety in for the random model airports, and especially nice that Tarmac Designs released both of these aircraft. So it's awesome that they've made those, and happy that I get to use them even for substitutions and all that fun stuff. So great for the sake of variety in the case of that. But now we move on to an actual FedEx aircraft. In this case, we have an ATR 72. And this also arrived in from Anchorage as Flight 8663 at 10:24 a.m., delayed from a 10:23 a.m. scheduled arrival. And then our final aircraft, we do have a DC-3. Now, this is actually one of the turbine-powered ones that like to float around. I've seen them occasionally whenever I check Flight Radar up in this region. But in this case, I have my Clay Lacy Aviation United painted DC-3 as a substitute, since there aren't any turbine DC-3s in this scale. I don't think they've ever been made, and probably don't differ too much other than the engines and all that. This ride in from Anchorage is Flight Tango November Victor 133 at 9:45 a.m. ahead of a scheduled 10:09 a.m. arrival. I love the depth of field on that. This camera does really good when you zoom in really closely on subjects on a nice flat background, and that's just how it appeared there. But that, my friends, there is Fairbanks, number 84 in the Random Model Airport series, so 16 away now from the big 100. We'll definitely reach that probably by the end of the year, I think, especially if we keep going to this twice monthly, and then with the occasional third update on months with 5 Fridays, we'll definitely hit 100 before year's end. So I don't know what I'm going to do yet still with that, but I'm starting to think of some ideas. Let me know what you think of that, and I'll certainly pursue that if my schedule allows. So great to get Alaska checked off for this series. Really happy with how this turned out and hope you guys enjoyed this update. With that being said, thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.